Welcome back to another Overwatch Coach VOD review. I thought I'd try something different for this video. So, threw a VOD on, somebody didn't get a reply to. It was for a Widowmaker. We're just gonna leave it play in the background. And something I discovered on the OverwatchUniversity subreddit is people just asking like simple questions, and sometimes I get replies to, sometimes I don't. I thought I'd reply to a few questions here and there that I see that didn't get a reply, and we'll just start some conversation based on those and just see where the video goes. So, first question is, somebody tell me if this is true. If one team has a Mercy and the other one does not, the chances of the DPS gapping the enemy is way lower. One DPS is afforded nearly instant heals upon taking damage, and they get rezzed if they die. Meanwhile, the other DPS is not guaranteed any healing during any fight. No, I would not agree with that at all. I mean, there's definitely some caveats out there where there might be a Mercy hard pocketing a duo, and they're kind of just, I almost want to say trolling in a sense, because they're literally only stuck to that one person and they won't venture off of them at all. I don't like playing with that scenario. It's not saying it will never work, but it's frustrating to play with. However, just because there's a Mercy on your team does not guarantee there's going to be less or more of a Widow gap. So typically, when you play Mercy, you're an extension of both of your DPS, in my opinion, if you're playing her correctly. So typically, you want to play Mercy with hit scan characters, the Cassidys, the Ashes, the Widowmakers, that sort of thing. And if they're landing shots, the pocket is going to be beneficial. If they're not landing shots, now you've got two characters not doing damage, that sort of thing. So, how I usually coach the Mercies that I view in a VOD review is, obviously you go for whichever DPS character you feel is going to give you the best chance to land shots. Maybe it's a soldier. Maybe you got soldier and Widowmaker, and you pocket the Widowmaker for like the first minute and you're not really hearing any hit marker sounds, or if you are, they're just body shots to a tank or something like that. Well, is pocketing that Widowmaker going to be beneficial if that's all you're getting out of her? Not really. Meanwhile, you've got a soldier who's done like double their damage in a couple fights already, and maybe you start gravitating a little bit more to them. And I'm not saying you hard pocket the soldier the entire game, but you start gravitating more to them. And suddenly now your games are going a little bit more in your direction, that kind of a thing. And, maybe after a one team fight, you go back to the Widow because there's going to be a large gap between when the next team fight starts, and you give that Widow another chance. And then as they start getting closer, you go a little bit more to the Brawly DPS, who still is a hit scan, but you might get some more beneficial, damage boosting from that kind of a thing. So if you're not getting a Mercy like that, and the DPS they're pocketing isn't, landing shots or just benefiting from the pocket, well, then of course. But if played what would be, in my opinion, the correct way of Mercy, then a lot of times you would say that having the Mercy would benefit the DPS side that has the Mercy, because Mercy played correctly is going between and focusing on the DPS side of things and not the tank, which would then leave the other support in charge of focusing on healing the tank first, and then the DPS second, and then that can all be situational as the team fight starts to actually happen. But to answer your question, no, I would typically think that the team that has the Mercy, their DPS should benefit from it. I say should, but it's all on the person who's playing Mercy's play style, and if the DPS are landing their shots and actually benefiting from it. All right, so next question. I'm a tank player, and I've noticed the difference in difficulty between Gold 1 and Plat 3 is a lot more vast than I anticipated. What sort of things can I work on to start getting myself in shape for Plat and above? What sort of skills can I focus on polishing now so that I can start climbing faster? I play Diva, Zarya, Ramatra, and Winton. Okay, so yeah, you're for anybody watching this, you're going to see skill gaps as you start climbing, and the games will start playing differently as you continue to climb. That definitely felt way more real in Overwatch 1 than it does in 2. I'm actually as I've been trying to climb or not climb, but play different accounts to unlock Lifeweaver. I've been a little surprised at the level of gameplay I've been seeing at lower ranks. So my main account as of right now is in Masters 3. And I've got another account that I've been grinding out just to get Lifeweaver, who's been just kind of bouncing around in Diamond for the most part. And those games feel a lot, they don't feel like Diamond games. They feel lower. I have not played anything below that, so I don't know how those games are feeling, but I'm a little unimpressed with what I've been seeing in Diamond, and also frustrated because I'm expecting people to do things that they're not doing, and I don't know, I'm getting all kinds of weird interactions in Diamond games. So, but the point I'm trying to make is when you're starting at the bottom, or if you're a new player and you're starting at the bottom, as you climb these ranks, you are going to see the gameplay change. Primarily, it's going to be mechanical. So things you could get away with, in a silver game, you'll get more punished on in gold, and then in plat, and so forth and so forth. So the common thing I tend to be harping on in the VOD reviews that I do is people's positioning. And I see this in Diamond games quite a bit too. And what I see is feeding. People dive in alone or almost alone. They play into counters. So if you're playing tank, counter picking is a big deal, especially in Overwatch 2 with there only being one tank. So, like if you go Diva and you're up against a Zarya, you're playing into a counter, and if that Zarya is just melting you all the time and your team's doing you no favors by shooting Zarya bubbles all the time, you're going to feed that Zarya and you're going to melt to her. Same thing with Winton. If you play Winton into, let's say, Reaper and Bastion, and let's just say Reinhardt, because I had this exact scenario in a high-level Diamond game yesterday. And it was really, really infuriating because they never swapped off of it. And we lost. And frankly, I felt like we lost because of that, them not willing to swap off of Winton. And, he played into a counter. And I'll admit, he did good considering what he was playing into, but we still felt a tank diff essentially. And for good reason. I mean, it's hard. Winston's bubble doesn't stay alive against a Reaper and a Bastion. And then, nobody's melting the Reinhardt shield. So they've got like an infinite shield, and ours is up for like 2 seconds. And then we're, running for our lives again. So it made a difference. So counter picking and your positioning are going to be the two highest variables I can suggest as a tank player. The biggest thing for learning positioning, watch streamers that play at a high level, get VOD reviews, and I would even go another level depending on how serious of an Overwatch player you really want to be. Keep track of your wins and losses on particular maps and figure out the maps that you're losing on, and those would be the maps to focus on getting VOD reviews on primarily, because you want to get VOD reviews on things you're tending to struggle with. But at least you've got a good hero pool to pull from. You've already got 4 heroes down. I always tell people have at least a minimum of 3. I mean, keep that hero pool climbing. The more you're better at, that would be the other thing to add to what would help you climb. The more heroes you can play and be comfortable at, the better you're going to have. I would add Sigma. I would look at Sigma and Reinhardt as your next two heroes to play and get good at, essentially. I think those would be two great ones to add to your repertoire. All right, next question. I play Mei and Sombra, who are both quite different. Is there a third, not too aim-heavy DPS folks would recommend to fill out my bag of tricks? Sometimes, albeit rarely, it feels like neither is working, but I can't put my finger on why. Well, if you're looking for heroes that aren't super aim-heavy, you probably maybe don't want to be in the DPS queue, because frankly, I mean, if you're playing like comp and actually trying to climb, you're going to need to play some form of a hit scan hero. I mean, Sombra's kind of hit scan, but you're going to need to play like real hit scans. Like once you start climbing into the upper echelons of ranks, snipers and hit scans are a lot of times the end all be all. Like as I say that, look at that shot that Widowmaker made. So yeah, I mean, you definitely would want to be considering hit scan characters. If you're playing a little bit more on the casual side, I would suggest Torb, Symmetra, Bastion. Yeah, I'd throw those heroes out there if you're looking to stay in the DPS role of things. Symmetra doesn't take a ton of aim, but you're basically looking at any projectile hero. Hanzo's kind of projectile in that. Well, Hanzo is a projectile hero, so you could maybe throw Hanzo into that. He's got a unique aim sense to him. Yeah, something like that. Symmetra's good though for the no aim as long as you can track. Boy, I'm gonna tell you right now, this Widowmaker that I'm watching, it almost looks like she's cheating. And I think I actually grabbed the VOD review of somebody asking if this Widowmaker was cheating, and this actually does look a little suspicious. I'm not in this game. I just grabbed a VOD somebody posted on the OverwatchUniversity Discord, so I might have to actually post a little comment about that on their post, because nobody replied to it. But yeah, this looks a little fishy to me, as I'm just kind of sort of watching this. But anyway, yeah, I'd say Torb, Sim, Bastion, that sort of thing. Hanzo maybe. Hanzo requires aim, but it's a unique kind of an aim, so you could maybe get good with Hanzo too and have like a unique aim sense or something like that. But if aim is really not your thing, you might want to just maybe start looking at different support heroes like Moira, Mercy, maybe Lifeweaver now, stuff like that. Support has kind of a unique aim sense to it too, so there's a lot of projectile heroes in the support role. So if you're finding projectile DPS to be more your thing, that might work too. Next question. Does anyone know why this game puts me in plat lobbies when I haven't even received my rank yet? It's trying to figure out your hidden... Well, okay, so everybody has a hidden MMR rank. And as you play games, it adjusts that. So as you were doing your tutorials and your quick play games, it keeps track of your stats, and you must have been doing good in those. So it starts to place you higher and higher. And as you start playing ranked games, it's always trying to figure out your MMR, and it's a constant adjustment. The more games you play, the more accurate it gets. And with that, it can be harder to change that MMR. I mean, it will always adjust, but it gets harder to get out of a particular rank the more and more and more you play. And what I mean by that is seasons and seasons and seasons. I'm not talking like one season or something like that, but as the seasons go on and you continue to play, let's just say you get a little bit better and you end up kind of getting stuck around low gold, and people complain that, oh, I'm always low gold even though I'm starting to win. Well, their hidden MMR has really started to solidify them at a lower diamond rank, and it gets harder to get that to climb out as time goes on. So that would be my best guess for why it's putting you in plat lobbies. And as you play, that hidden MMR gets more accurate, and you'll start to place a little bit more where you probably belong if you feel you don't actually belong in a plat lobby. Yeah. Next question. What are the best DPS to learn in the current meta? What makes the most good tank, DPS, or support? I'm not sure I understand the second question. What makes the most good tank? Well, let's answer the first one because I at least understand that one. So, as of right now, I mean, it always is going to depend to some degree on what the enemy is playing. Like, you could be a god tier Widowmaker, but if the enemy team's running a bunch of dive and they are coordinating their dive to get in the face of the Widowmaker, the Widow's not going to do much. Just isn't. So counter picking is going to be your best bet for everything. Having multiple heroes that you can swap to, understanding a hero's role, and knowing what to play to counter pick what the enemy team is running at you with is always going to be beneficial. With that said, hit scans and snipers for right now are probably going to be your safest bet. But it's not going to be an end all be all. So like if you're going up against a Winston, go Bastion. If you're going up against a god tier sniper and you play a good sniper, then outsnipe them. If you're not, dive them. Learn Genji, learn Tracer, learn Sombra, or something that can dive them. Something like that. So, but hit scans have always been the safer bet for what is meta. If you're a good Torbjorn, if you're a good Symmetra, there's top 500 one tricks that play those characters and, can for the most part get by only playing those characters. I mean, if you watch a one trick Symmetra streamer, for example, they'll usually have a hero or two they'll flip to when the Symmetra thing isn't working, but for the most part, they're only playing that hero. So, if you can be a god tier one trick at a particular hero with minimal swapping in between, because it won't work 100% of the time, but you could probably make it work a lot of the time. Let's rewind this and we'll just grab onto somebody else's view here. But if you can make that work the majority of the time, let's say like 90, 80% of the time, then, do it. But yeah, go with usually it's the heroes though in the DPS role that are the most talented to play, usually will stay in the meta, usually. Genji's kind of sort of falling out of it a little bit because of some recent nerfs, and Genji's a harder to play hero, and he's usually been meta, but for the most part, stick to the hit scans and the snipers for at least now. And if you're any good at them, you should do well. Let's see. Next question. Let's see. Where did I leave off? Why did I get a demotion? I got 5 wins and 5 losses in Plat 3. Then I got demoted to Plat 4. Please somebody enlighten me why I didn't rank up. So, it's hard to answer without more subcontext to it, but I can at least try to provide some insight and some theory to it. Some of this is borrowed from a post I saw on the OverwatchUniversity of somebody else who got a promotion when they thought they shouldn't. But ultimately, without some extra subcontext to it, it's hard to answer this, but I'll give you my thoughts on it. So when you at the end of a game, and I think it's at the iteration when you do when you get your rank update iteration. So say you got your 5 wins and it says your, what did you say? Plat 4. So let's say it took you, let's say when you got your promotion to Plat 3, when you hit Plat 3, at the bottom of that screen, it says something to the effect of you rank in the top let's say 20% of people in Plat 3. So it essentially means 80% of the people in Plat 3 are higher than you within that ranking. So that means you're at the lower side of Plat 3. So then we look at, okay, you got 5 wins and 5 losses. Out of those 5 wins and 5 losses, out of those 10 games, there were games where you were predicted by the matchmaker to win, and there were games in there you were predicted to lose. Now, I don't know which ones you were predicted to win and which ones you were predicted to lose, and neither do you. And, to the best of my knowledge, that's all hidden information from us. But the fact remains, it's still there. It just isn't really told to us. So you going even, back in Overwatch 1, just because you went even doesn't necessarily mean you would have climbed in rank. Now, would you have dropped a substantial amount? No. You would have maybe dropped a few points or something, but you still would have dropped, because it tended to take more points away from you than it would award points. So if you broke even, it's very likely you would have dropped a few points. But again, we're talking a few points. So I think the current matchmaker, when you lose a game it thinks you should win, I think it penalizes you a lot more than it would have used to have done. And on the vice versa, if you're winning a bunch of games that you maybe were predicted to lose, but you won them, I think it rewards you more than it used to back in the Overwatch 1 days. So if, let's say, you were toward the bottom end of Plat 3, you didn't have a lot of wiggle room to begin with, breaking even doesn't necessarily mean you stayed at the same rank. And then depending on, what the matchmaker thought you should have done and what you actually did, you may have been penalized a bit for that. And then because of that, you deranked. That would be my best theory for you. No, by no means am I saying that's 100% accurate. I don't think anybody's got an exact answer for why you would have deranked, but that was the theory that I've seen talked about in a couple other threads within the OverwatchUniversity subreddit. So hopefully that helps you better understand what's going on. Okay, last question. I am a Mei main. What maps should I flex off of Mei, and who should I flex to? Also, can you play Mei with dive? If so, who would be in the dive comp? So in terms of maps you should flex off of, I think so Mei, in my opinion, is at her best when you've got good situations where you can use Ice Wall to isolate enemy teammates, and use that to kind of like get your team to all converge maybe on a overzealous tank player or an overzealous DPS player. Maybe say, for example, King's Row. You guys are fighting on the second part of the map, through those alleyway, the really narrow roadway, and the enemy team's got a Reinhardt that's like really overzealous. So you pop up an ice wall and you isolate the Reinhardt, and then every time your team just converges on them, and now all of a sudden the enemy team's fighting without a tank the whole time. That would be where Mei has the most advantage, in my opinion. King of the Hill maps can be good for Mei because you can throw your ult on point and you've got a large chunk of the point isolated now where the enemy team's going to have to get off of it. Things like that can really help make space. When you're playing on maps that are very open, so say for example, what's a open map? Like maybe like the first point of Junkertown, as an example, that's a very open area of map. Maps like that, maybe not so advantageous for Mei. Once you start getting to the second point and the third point, it starts getting a little bit better for her. But that first section of map, not so great. And then you said what map? So yeah, the maps that you're open more and where taking space becomes a little bit more difficult for Mei. Don't get me wrong. There's areas in Junkertown that are great for her. And I can even think of that one spot in Junkertown's first point where the defense has that like little bridge set up over that tight choke. Like that area is pretty good for Mei. But once they get through that, it's very wide open. And at that point, it might be difficult to make Mei work. Now, once you start getting into the second point, it starts getting a little easier again. And then the third point's pretty good for Mei too. But, Circuit Royale might be a little bit difficult, especially if the enemy team's running like very long range characters. And if you've got a tank that's not providing much for cover, that can be difficult. Mei's really good too if your supports are struggling, because then you can give yourself some self heals. Mei tends to be one of the characters I like going when the healers or the supports are struggling. And then you asked if Mei can play with dive. I mean, is she the best character to play with dive? In my opinion, probably not. Can she? I'm sure you probably could make it work. I think in some cases it's going to be situational on the type of map. Are you on offense? Are you on defense? That sort of a thing. I think in a King of the Hill scenario, she could probably play with dive, especially if there's a Lucio speed boosting her around a bit. But to just blindly ask if she can play with dive, I think is kind of a tough one to answer. Like I can see scenarios where, yeah, it would work, but it depends on what team, like if you're playing with a group of friends, it would depend what kind of a team comp we're talking about. I think though, ultimately, if you had a Lucio to help speed a Mei around, yeah, she could probably play with dive. I could probably see that working on a King of the Hill scenario. Maybe on attack, for like a push map might be fine, for that sort of a thing. I don't know. It's very situational based. If you've got a little bit more of a specific scenario in mind on that type of a question, feel free to maybe post that in the comment or something, and I can always kind of readdress that with you privately. But yeah, I can see scenarios where it works, but to just throw it out there blindly, that's hard to say. Like Mei with Diva, for example, might be difficult because Diva's one of those tanks that doesn't output a ton of damage and doesn't also output a ton of cover. So that one might be a little bit more difficult because Mei doesn't do a ton of damage. So yeah, it's a little situational, but I can definitely see scenarios where it would work. If so, who would be in the dive comp? So scenarios where I could maybe see that one working would probably be Winston, Genji, Mei, Lucio, maybe, or maybe Mercy to help damage boost your stream when you're streaming. You're doing your frozen spray on somebody. Otherwise, Lucio for the speed boost to help keep you moving around and being mobile. I think it would be difficult to do with Diva just because of the lack of damage that comes out of that, unless depending on what the enemy team's running, like if they're running, let's say Bastion or something like that, or Sigma or something, then it could maybe work. As far as the other DPS goes, it would either have to be Genji or Tracer, I would think. I can't really see any other dive. I mean, that's pretty much all there is for dive for DPS. I mean, I guess Sojourn's a little on the divey side with her, slide and jump ability and whatnot. It depends too on like what you've got for a support comp, because like, say for example, you're on a cart push map. Somebody's got to push it. So, at that point you're playing maybe like Zen or Anna. So then at that point, what is the other support playing? Obviously, like I said, I feel like Lucio would probably be a good one. You could probably do Moira, and she could probably help DPS and do a bunch of burst healing off of that. You know, and then if you had like a Zen out there, you guys could be diving whoever's discorded, that kind of a thing. Some of it's going to depend on what the enemy team's running too, because the tank's going to have to counter pick a lot. But yeah, anyway, I hope that discussion of that answer was hopefully helpful, because it gets kind of convoluted and you get lost in the weeds on that kind of a thing pretty quickly. So that's going to be my first iteration for this idea that I had for a video. So hopefully you guys like this and found this helpful. And thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.